can to sell the idea that this is all Iran's fault. And, Israel's running around screaming, Iran is going to attack the United States. Iran is going to attack the United States. Warning to U.S. Jews, you should be hiding in your basements and so forth and so on. They're just advertising the fact they're going to do a false flag attack. And I understand why they have to do that. Because you have Russia and you have China who are committed to coming in on Iran's side in a confrontation if Israel simply hauls off and invades Iran. So from Israel's point of view, they have to make it look like Iran is starting the hostilities. Then the Russian and the Chinese people will say, well, it's not really our problem if Iran is starting the war. So there's going to be a false flag. They're just basically advertising it. It's all a question of when. And, of course, Sunday's Super Bowl Sunday, and they've been pushing the terror link on that. They're teaching the hot dog salespeople how to spot terrorists. So I think after the Super Bowl game, we'll probably see about 5,000 lousy tippers rounded up and sent to the gulags here. But the U.S. is already talking about sending additional bunker buster bombs, aerial refueling tankers, all this stuff that you paid for with money that should have gone to your schools and roads and hospitals and stuff. But we keep on just, sending all of this munitions over there at taxpayer expense. Now, they're in trying to make it look like this is all Iran's fault. They are getting to some very, very bizarre extremes here. Okay, Leon Panetta came out earlier today and said the U.S. is not going to take part in an Israeli invasion of Iran. But if Iran were to try and fight back against Israel, then the U.S. would be forced to come in. So it's this roundabout logic. Basically, what the U.S. policy toward Iran amounts to is, I'm going to let my little brother stomp on your toes all he wants, but if you try and stop him, then I'll kick you in the nuts. That's basically what the U.S. is trying to say. And it's just another way of trying to make it look like, it's Iran's fault. If they just sit there and let Israel bomb them back into the Stone Age, nice and politely, then we wouldn't have to go in and help bomb them back to the Stone Age. And it's absurd rationale, but they're desperate. They're desperate to find something where they can put the blame on this, over onto Iran. I mean, some of the headlines are out there. Iran is helping Al-Qaeda. I mean, have we not heard this one before? Back when Israel was trying to get us to go to war against Iraq, and they were saying weapons of mass destruction, which didn't exist, and they're helping Al-Qaeda, which turned out to be a lie, and they had something to do with 9/11, and that turned out not to be true. And these days, of course, everybody stop quoting 9/11. It's more than 10 years ago. You've milked that cow to death here. So anyway, they're trying to fan up this war hysteria here. There was an article out earlier today basically saying that the best way to prevent a world war is to just smash Iran completely as quickly as possible and get it over with before Russia and China can come in. That's how they're going to avoid World War III, is they're just going to clobber the place and turn it into a green glass parking lot. And, I mean, it's just silly. Blitzkrieg went out of fashion in the middle of the last century, and the nation that pioneered Blitzkrieg lost the war. I'd like to, put a little special emphasis on that. Now, obviously, the American people understand what's going on, and there are protests set for tomorrow, February 4th, in 56 cities, including here in Hawaii, in Honolulu. And I'm going to try and get down and get some video shot of that in the morning. As a matter of fact, the Hawaii No War on Iran protest is actually starting tonight because it's tied in with the Occupy people. They're back. They were evicted yesterday. They're back today. And, we're... they're starting to hand out leaflets about the war in Iran, and it's just everybody understands what's going on. Israel wants the U.S. to go to war against Iran, and that's what's going on. All right, to respond to what's going on in the chat room, yes, I am doing my Rents show over the telephone. Our normal linkage is not working. Our technician is trying to fix it. And as I said at the top of the show, I apologize for the poor sound quality. We're working to get our link back up and running, but it seems to be that there may be something going on, with the internet, which itself would be a warning that the false flag is about to hit. Now, I want to talk about a tale of two translations, because if you've been watching the corporate media or reading WorldNet Daily or CNN or Fox, they're all screaming about these very provocative statements that Iran is making about how they're going to be victorious and how Islam will prevail and all the rest of this stuff. And don't take my word for it, please go over to the Iranian websites. Okay? Go over to the Iranian websites, Press TV, and read what Iran's leadership is actually saying. The translations you're being given over in the American media are not even in the same time zone. The American media, they're getting their translations from memory, which we know is a pro-Israel propaganda arm. And what the American media is telling you that Iran is saying is not what Iran is saying. And you need to go out and find those translations for yourself and decide for yourself. The American media has been given their marching orders, and their marching orders is to march your children into another war and one of Israel's enemies. And they're going to say and do anything to get it going, and by anything I mean, they're going to blow up something really important in the United States of America, and they're going to blame Iran for it. Okay? So, let's see. The latest polls, despite all the propaganda and all the fear-mongering and all the rest of it, less than 1/5 of all Americans favor either military or covert action against Iran. That's 20%. Now, that's higher than Obama's approval rating, so he's going to take that as a mandate to move forward. But even, less than half the Israelis want a war on Iran. This is coming just from the people at the very top, and they want this thing to go forward, and they don't care what you want. They don't care what's happening to your children. Or how they're going to die and be blown to bits here. 65% of the poll respondents want the entire Middle East to be a nuclear-free zone, which it would be were it not for Israel. So, now we need to go back and we need to take a real good look at some of the stuff that's been happening here in terms of Israel's influence over the United States going into Iraq, because they're basically replaying the same thing now. The only difference is AIPAC has now gone out, and it's told the American media that even though AIPAC is out there lobbying members of Congress and lobbying the media to go whoop on Iran, that the American media shouldn't say that it's AIPAC that's providing all this information, because it might convince people that Israel is calling the shots in the U.S. government and it's Israel that wants this war, which it happens to be, but their goal is that you should never hear about it. And yet we know that's what it is. And they're thrashing around. I'm seeing a great deal of disorganization and almost panic in their desire to get this war going, and their inability to find anything that is going to trick the American people into sacrificing more of their children's blood, on wars on Israel's enemies. So, anyway, there was another article out there, Iran's secret weapon, oil for gold. And it was this article about how Iran is selling their oil in exchange for gold, not dollars, to India, China, Russia, and so forth and so on. And they're trying to spin it that Iran did this deliberately to hurt the dollar and hurt America. And I cringe they're using the word weapon. Weapon has nothing to do with it. Okay, Bernanke's pouring of billions and billions of newly created dollars all over Europe every single day to stave off collapse and protect those New York banks that issued 97% of the credit default swaps on the European debt means the value of the dollar is falling rapidly, if you haven't noticed that at the supermarket and the gas pump yet. Iran, out of their own economic preservation, has to move away from using the dollar. So does India, China, Russia, and Europe. It's not an attack. They're simply saying, we can't trust the dollar. All right, I'm hearing the music. When the corporate media has been given the mission, they are out to convince you that war with Iran is imminent and it's Iran's fault. And they're out there saying that Iran is making all these provocative statements about attacking the United States of America. And if you go over to the Iranian media, no, they're not saying anything like that at all. They're saying basically it's time for the Middle East to turn their backs on Israel and the United States and run their own affairs, which seems like a very reasonable statement to make. But the U.S. corporate media is trying to convince you that they're threatening and they're making, they're saying bad words about Americans and laughing about it and trying to just make it look like Iran is the aggressor. And, of course, history says that's nonsense. Iran is not culturally in the habit of invading other countries. They haven't invaded another country for like 200 years. Certainly not since they became an Islamic republic in 1979. In that same period of time, 1979 to the present, Israel is attacking Iraq and Lebanon and Gaza again and Lebanon again and Syria and Egypt and all the rest of that stuff. And the occasional American aid worker. The United States, you can't even keep track of how many countries they've invaded. So Iran is not the threat to world peace, and Iran is not going to be behind any big bangs that happen in the next few days. It will be Mossad and CIA, or both together, just as it was in New York, just as it was over with the USS Liberty, just as it was at the Lavon affair, and the bombing of the King David Hotel, and the attack on the USS Cole. This is how wars get started, through lies and deception.